Most of the people who identify with the religion of Islam view the Prophet Muhammad as perhaps the greatest man who has ever lived. However, it's not just Muslims who have held the Prophet Muhammad and the religion of Islam in high regard, but also many well-known people from all backgrounds have done so as well. Okay, so let's jump in. At number 10, we have a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, and this is what he had to say. "I wanted to know the best of one who holds today's undisputed sway over the hearts of millions of mankind. I became more than convinced that it was not the sword that won a place for Islam in those days in the scheme of life. It was the rigid simplicity, the utter self-effacement of the Prophet, the scrupulous regard for his pledges, his intense devotion to his friends and followers, his intrepidity, his fearlessness, his absolute trust in God and in his own mission." Number 9 brings us a quote from Washington Irving. Now, who is he? He was an American writer and a historian, and this is what he had to say. "In his private dealings, he was just. He treated friends and strangers, rich and poor, the powerful and weak, with equity, and was beloved by the common people for the affability with which he received them and listened to their complaints. His military triumphs awakened no pride nor vainglory, as they would have done had they been effected for selfish purposes. In the time of his greatest power, he maintained the same simplicity of manners and appearance as in the days of his adversity." Even the famous Napoleon Bonaparte had something to say about Islam. He said, "I hope the time is not far off when I shall be able to unite all the wise and educated men of all the countries and establish a uniform regime based on the principles of Quran, which alone are true and which alone can lead men to happiness." Next up at number 7, we have Sarojini Naidu, and she was an Indian political activist as well as a poet, and this is what she had to say. "It was the first religion that preached and practiced democracy. For, in the mosque, when the call for prayer is sounded and worshippers are gathered together, the democracy of Islam is embodied 5 times a day when the peasant and the king kneel side by side and proclaim, 'God alone is great.' I have been struck over and over again by this indivisible unity of Islam that makes man instinctively a brother." Number 6 is a quote from the British author and commentator Karen Armstrong. And in her statement she says, "Islam is a religion of success. Unlike Christianity, which has as its main image, in the West at least, a man dying in a devastating, disgraceful, helpless death, Muhammad was not an apparent failure. He was a dazzling success politically as well as spiritually, and Islam went from strength to strength to strength." The next statement comes from H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was a famous English writer, and he said, "The Islamic teachings have left great traditions for equitable and gentle dealings and behavior, and inspire people with nobility and tolerance. These are human teachings of the highest order, and at the same time practicable. These teachings brought into existence a society in which hard-heartedness and collective oppression and injustice were the least as compared with all other societies preceding it. Islam is replete with gentleness, courtesy, and fraternity." Number 4 brings us the Dalai Lama, and this is a quote from the lips of Dalai Lama himself. "Since September 11th event, in many occasions I always come forth with a defense of Islam. Islam, like any other major tradition, I think the very praising Allah means love, infinite love, compassion, like that. I understand Islam, they usually carry rosaries, all 99 beads, different names of Allah, all refer compassion or these positive things." Former President George W. Bush also had something to say about Islam, and this is what he said in his own words. "Islam brings hope and comfort to millions of people in my country and to more than 1 billion people worldwide. Ramadan is also an occasion to remember that Islam gave birth to a rich civilization of learning that has benefited mankind." The legendary talk show host and philanthropist, billionaire Oprah, this is what she had to say about the religion of Islam, specifically about Sufism. She says, "Love Sufism, the divinity of the human soul. Within our spiritual heart, there is a direct connection to God. I have respect for all faiths, but what I'm talking about is not faith or religion. I'm talking about spirituality. And finally, the statement at number 1 comes from Pope John Paul II, and this is what he had to say. The religiosity of Muslims deserves respect. It is impossible not to admire, for example, their fidelity to prayer. The image of believers in Allah who, without caring about time or place, fall to their knees and immerse themselves in prayer remains a model for all those who invoke the true God. In particular, for those Christians who have deserted their magnificent cathedrals, praying only a little or not at all. Many famous people of the past as well as recent times had a lot to say about the religion of Islam as well as the Prophet Muhammad. At number 10, we have Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He was a German writer as well as an artist and a politician during the 1800s. And this is what he had to say. We Europeans, with all our concepts and ideas, have not yet attained that which Muhammad attained, and no one will ever surpass him. Thus, the truth must prevail and become supreme, because Muhammad succeeded in subjugating the whole world by means of the message of divine oneness. Next up at number 9, we have a very popular statement from George Bernard Shaw from The Genuine Islam. And this is what he had to say. I have studied him, Prophet Muhammad, the wonderful man, and in my opinion, far from being an antichrist. He must be called the savior of humanity. I believe that if a man like him were to assume the dictatorship of the modern world, he would succeed in solving its problems in a way that would bring in much needed peace and happiness. Number 8 brings us Edward Montet. His name is also spelled Edward, E-D-W-A-R-D, but this man, he was a professor of theology, and this is what he had to say. Islam is a religion that is essentially rationalistic in the widest sense of this term, etymologically and historically. The teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran, has invariably kept its place as the fundamental starting point, and the dogma of unity of God has always been proclaimed therein with a grandeur and majesty and invariable purity, and with a note of sure conviction, which is hard to find surpassed outside the pale of Islam. Number 7 brings us the second statement from Edward Montet. Well, this one can actually be combined with the first statement, but either way, these words communicate something a little bit more as well as add on to the previous statement. This fidelity to the fundamental dogma of the religion, the elemental simplicity of the formula in which it is enunciated, the proof that it gains from the fervid convictions of the missionaries who propagate it, are so many causes to explain the successes of the Mohammedan missionary efforts. A creed so precise, so stripped of all theological complexities, and consequently so accessible to the ordinary misunderstood, might be expected to possess, and does indeed possess, a marvelous power of winning its way into the consciences of men. Number 6 is a statement from Alphonse de Lamartine, and he was a French writer, and he said this: if greatness of purpose, smallness of means, and astonishing results are the 3 criteria of a human genius, who could dare compare any great man in history with Muhammad? The most famous men created arms, laws, and empires only. This man moved not only armies, legislations, empires, peoples, dynasties, but millions of men in 1/3 of the then inhabited world, and more than that, he moved the altars, the gods, the religions, the ideas, the beliefs, and the souls. Number 5 brings us Thomas Carlyle. Now, Thomas Carlyle, he was a British historian, a teacher, as well as a writer. And in his statement, he said this: the lies, Western slander, which well-meaning zeal has heaped round this man Muhammad are disgraceful to ourselves only. A silent great soul, one of that who cannot but be earnest. He was to kindle the world's maker had ordered so. From there, we move on to number 4. We have Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, by the way, he served as the 39th president of the United States from the years 1977 to 1981. And this is what he had to say: I have been struck by the human and moral values which Americans as a people share with Islam. We share, first and foremost, a deep faith in one supreme being. We are all commanded by him to faith, compassion, and justice. We have a common respect and reverence for law. Despite the strains of the modern age, we continue to place special importance on the family and the home. And we share the belief that hospitality is a virtue and that the host, whether a nation or an individual, should behave with generosity and honor towards guests. On the basis of both values and interests, the natural relationship between Islam and the United States is one of friendship. I affirm that friendship both as a reality and as a goal, and I am determined to strengthen, not weaken, the long-standing and valued bonds of friendship and cooperation between the United States and many Muslim nations. We're coming down close to the end of this episode, and at number 3, that brings us Professor Alfred Kroner, and he was a world-famous geologist, and this is what he had to say. Thinking about many of these questions and thinking where Muhammad came from, he was, after all, a Bedouin. I think it is almost impossible that he could have known about things like the common origin of the universe, because scientists have only found out within the last few years with very complicated and advanced technological methods that this is the case. The statement at number 2 comes from Hillary Clinton. She's the wife of the former US President Bill Clinton, as well as the woman who almost became the first ever female president of the United States, but she lost to Donald Trump. And in her words, she says this: Islam is the fastest growing religion in America, a guide and pillar of stability for many of our people. And by the way, this was taken from the Los Angeles Times from May 31st, 1996, part 3. And finally, the statement at number 1 in this episode comes from Koneru Ramakrishna Rao. And they were a philosopher, a psychologist, and a teacher who was awarded the civilian honor of the Padma Shri back in the year 2011 by the Indian government. And if you're not familiar, the Padma Shri is the 4th highest civilian award. And the statement goes as follows: the personality of Muhammad, it is most difficult to get into the whole truth of it. There is Muhammad the prophet, there is Muhammad the warrior, Muhammad the businessman, Muhammad the statesman, Muhammad the orator, Muhammad the reformer, Muhammad the refuge of orphans, Muhammad the protector of slaves, Muhammad the emancipator of women, Muhammad the judge, Muhammad the saint. Definitely brings a whole new perspective there, because there are so many perspectives to look at the religion of Islam as well as the Prophet Muhammad. Starting at number 10, we have Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson is probably one of the most famous actors in the entire world. Like literally, he just doesn't stop acting. I literally think in his grave, he's still going to be acting. But anyways, this is what he had to say about the religion of Islam in general. The call to prayer happens 5 times a day, and for the first week, it drives you crazy, and then it just gets into your spirit, and it's the most beautiful thing. There are 4,000 mosques in the city. Some are just stunning, and it really makes me think about becoming a Muslim. Number 9 brings us a quote from Alphonse de Lamartine. He was a French writer, poet, and politician, and we quoted him actually in part 2, but there's another quote from him about the Prophet Muhammad specifically, and this is what he had to say: philosopher, orator, apostle, legislator, warrior, conqueror of ideas, restorer of rational dogmas, of a cult without images, the founder of 20 terrestrial empires and of one spiritual empire, that is Muhammad. All standards by which human greatness may be measured, we may well ask, is there any man greater than he? The quote at number 8 comes from William Montgomery Watt. Now, William Montgomery Watt was a Scottish historian as well as an Orientalist and Anglican priest at one point. Now, he says this about the Prophet Muhammad: his readiness to undergo persecution for his beliefs, the high moral character of the men who believed in him and looked up to him as a leader, and the greatness of his ultimate achievement all argue his fundamental integrity. To suppose Muhammad an impostor raises more problems than it solves. None of the great figures of history is so poorly appreciated in the West as Muhammad. Moving on now to statement number 7, that comes from James Michener. Now, this man was an American author. He wrote more than 40 books, and this is what he had to say about the religion of Islam. No other religion in history spread so rapidly as Islam. The West has widely believed that the surge of religion was made possible by the sword. But no modern scholar accepts this idea, and the Quran is explicit in the support of the freedom of conscience. Herbert George Wells comes in at number 6. Now, he was commonly referred to as H.G. Wells. He was an English writer of many different genres, and he said this: simply put, Islam is replete with gentleness, courtesy, and fraternity. We got 5 more quotes to look at. At number 5 is a quote from Lindsay Lohan, and she was speaking on Good Morning Britain when she said these words: "I think that me studying the Quran is something I found solace in. You can't just convert to a religion overnight. I just study it. Nothing is confirmed yet." Lindsay Lohan was a celebrity who was studying the religion of Islam in great depth, and she even began to practice a religion as a Muslim, headscarf and everything. Number 4 is Russell Brand. Back in July 2015, the British comedian and actor Russell Brand, he was speaking at a Muslim Aid event, and he said, "This event is a great example of the communities coming together to help each other, and it shows the generosity of the Muslim community and the charities like Muslim Aid." Ben Affleck is another famous person who said some surprising things about the religion of Islam. So in 2014, the American talk show host Bill Maher suggested that most Muslims believe people deserve to die for holding a different belief system than they do. However, Hollywood film star Ben Affleck, he responded like this, saying, "How about the more than 1 billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punish women, who just want to go to school, have some sandwiches, and don't do any of the things you say all Muslims do?" Another very popular celebrity who had something to say about the religion of Islam is Angelina Jolie. Now, she was speaking at an event at the Al Dulles Area Muslim Society back in the year 2016, and she said this in reference to the religion of Islam: "Strength lies in identifying how to address the very particular challenge from a small minority of people who choose the path of violent extremism or who abuse the religion without stigmatizing, isolating millions of people who share in that beautiful religion. When we discriminate, we imply by our actions that some lives are worth more than others." And finally, at number 1, we have Donald Trump. US President Donald Trump, he's had many things to say about the religion of Islam. Some of them a little bit more positive than others, some of them a little bit more negative. But in a positive light, he has made statements like this, and I quote, "For millions around the globe, this holy month is an opportunity to renew and strengthen their faith through rigorous fasting, devout prayer, reflective meditation, reading the Quran, and charitable deeds. These acts are closely aligned with the universal values that the Islamic faith promotes: peace, kindness, and love and respect for others."